I don't know what we can talk about in this nation without talking about white superiority, honestly.
Who defines the meaning of God also defines the relationship between economy and God.
African Americans spent $1.3 trillion last year, making us the 16th wealthiest nation in the world. Why have we not turned those riches into wealth to develop our community?
Peace, family. It's so good to be with you guys yet again for another installation of Happy Talks. We are still riding high from One Africa. A lot of things are just happening with all the Black love that was in Detroit. It's just emanating just all throughout the world. We are still getting messages from all types of people, just Black folks everywhere. So we are extremely grateful. The movement continues, and we are. I'm so happy to be actually hanging out with Dr. J and Dr. Rosalind tonight. But we have Dr. J tonight. We're gonna, go over. Well, we're not gonna go over his entire speech. Dr. J spoke for about 2 hours, and we want to leave some because we want you guys to get the live stream that we're going to be, the live stream that we're going to upload and have it out for, for you guys to purchase at a nominal fee probably in a couple weeks. We'll have that ready for everyone. But we want to, just in case you missed it, just kind of to get a sense of what was going on in Detroit for the One Africa Conference. Before we get started, I'm just going to just some little housekeeping things. We want to make sure you guys are liking and sharing this video. That's super important. And also another thing that's super important is this right here. Make sure that you go onto our website, HAPIfilm.com. You hit the Stay Connected button and get connected. Listen, you can't be part of the movement if you can't get any emails or any messages from us. So it's really important that you are on the newsletter email so that when we have information, you guys are the first people to get it. So make sure that you are, right there. And I just want to give a shout out to everyone that is in the house. There's Gigi, Brian. I tell you, Brian is everywhere. I was on the Susan Tata show last week, and I was like, "There's Brian." So it's nice to see that all of us are all connected with the same people. That's great, and we're just bringing on new people, and that's super important. But Brian has been in the house almost everywhere I'm on. So peace to Brian, peace to Steve, William, Strawberry. What's up, Akon Divine? Akon Divine was on early. Oh, but I see Baka out in LA. I see you, C Squad Records, who is also one of the HAPI producers. So it's nice to see him in the house. And there's LL. Yes. We did have I guess I should show some of these. We did have a very good time. Very, very good time. And you know what? And I'm just going to stop this madness right now and just put these glasses on because I don't know what I'm doing. Oh wow, look at that! Everything's in nice HD now. So peace to Camara, Professor Small in the house, Simba, and Kafayat, my girl Kafayat. She's a real estate developer out in Washington, D.C. So if you guys have any real estate needs or anything like that, you want to get up there with Kafayat husband. All right. So I am okay there. I see Dr. J and I see Arden Plumbing. Yes, he was one of the sponsors for our beautiful One Africa commemorative book. So we're going to and just to let you guys know, we're going to have all of these things out together. So it'll be the commemorative book and the One Africa live stream. And, so just in a couple of weeks, we will have that available for everybody. And if you want to show any HAPI love via Cash App right there, $HAPI Film. Listen, this money, if you guys didn't understand where this money went, if you came to the One Africa conference, you could see it for your eyes where the money went in terms of putting up that conference, and really all the things that we have in store for you guys. So it's going to be super cool. So any Cash App, love, and listen, we take anything. So you don't have to feel like, oh, I don't have a certain amount. Like whatever you have collectively, it goes a long way. And that's what we keep trying to keep on talking about, is collectively, this is how we can make this happen. And Nano. And I also want to give a special shout out to Segoya. Segoya took 3 trains and a bus to come to us from LA. She was our first person to buy a live stream ticket. And then she just decided, since it was going to be in Detroit, she's like, I'm rolling to Detroit. So she came to hang out with us. And now she's on the East Coast, hanging out. She went to the Malcolm X beautiful ceremony at his gravesite that Professor Small has been doing for many, 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 many years. And so she was there. And I see some of you other guys was there as well. All right, Travel Light. All right, so without further ado, I tell you, for this older gentleman to be 85 and still alive, as he says, he's always quick. It's like I see him there and then he's like up and gone. So he's sitting down now, so I'm gonna bring him in quickly before he disappears again. Hey, Dr. J.
Yes, Hotep, it's good to see the family ready to continue the great struggle that we're in. And it's a struggle that we can't afford to lose. So we might as well put on our fighting shoes. Now, see,
Yes.
Some people have said dancing shoes. No, I'm saying our fighting shoes. We got to be able to move quick and move surely in the right direction. So we want to thank HAPI and those who have been responsible for expanding its reach. And it certainly represents, for me, a continuation of the great work of our ancestors, the great work of people like Dr. John Henry Clark, who came up from Alabama, Georgia. And as a youngster, he was not even allowed to go into libraries because they were white controlled. That left within him the belief that libraries were so important that he made that a part of his life. And throughout his growing up in New York, in Harlem, he put together one of the greatest collections of books on African people. And then he had the generosity and the decency to donate the thousands of books to the Great Library Center at Atlanta, where Morehouse, Spelman, the other schools, Morris Brown and whatnot, are there. He donated 15,000 books to that Great Library Center. If knowledge is power, and you've been able to pull together 15,000 books, then clearly Dr. Clark is one of those special individuals that we need to appreciate and pay homage to him. And so I was blessed to be at his feet. In fact, around him were young people like myself who were trying to find our way. And so we developed this process of sitting at the feet of the masters. And Dr. Clark certainly was one of those masters who brought you into his home. There were enough chairs for elders, but for us, not so elder, we sat on stools or cushions and listened to the great works and ideas and concepts that these brothers and sisters were laying out for us. And so you have a generation, several generations that have transformed themselves from Negroes who did not know what they wanted to be to African supreme. In other words, we're leading the African world into Africanness with no apologies. In other words, people who go astray and they find some Negro nest somewhere, that's beautiful. But we're going to try to capture them and lasso them back on the path of becoming transformed Africans. You know how wonderful that is? Transformed Africans. Now, as youngsters, we were told to wait, and the good times would occur when Christmas occurred. And we had to wait and hope that somebody called the jolly giant Santa Claus would be bringing us some goodies to eat, some goodies to play with, some goodies to celebrate. Now, little did they know that that was a part of this process of learning to appreciate and worship whiteness. And at the flip side, to not respect or to fear blackness. So fortunately, with the explosion of information that has occurred with the generations around me, those generations before me, those generations that are my generations, those new generations, we've transformed that now. And all over the world, African people are attempting to expand their Africanness to establish the reality that Africans are the foundation people of the universe, that they were the first and the foremost to build for eternity. And the evidence for this building is around our world. We survived slavery when they tried to whip us into being not people, but to be things that could be exploited, super exploited in terms of enslavement. But we broke out of that mold, and that process of preventing us from being. And then we've been reaching all these years of my growth and development to understand what Africanness means. And it means taking control of your mind. So I used to have to give these speeches, and I always had to come up with something that was a little catchy. I mean, I was a musician growing up. I played not only alto sax, I played tenor sax. And then I met a lovely young lady who was conscious of things African, and also she was involved in music and played piano. And so that's reference to the other half of the Jeffries equation. That's Queen Mother Rosalind Jeffries, who was a pioneer. She was the first of many of us to get to Africa, to appreciate the diversity and the wonders of the African world. And so that she spent a career delving deep into that well of African knowledge that comes through the art, that comes through the culture, that comes through the rituals and sacred things, that comes through the understanding that we stand not alone, we stand with the universe, with the creator and those forces that we've been able to use to give clarity to who and what we are. So I'm so glad that HAPI has come into our world, and I'm happy. You can see me, I got a smile on my face now. Hey.
Hey. No, we are so happy. I mean, listen, you know, he talks a lot about just the beginnings of HAPI, and he's always like, there's no way he could even thought of this or had this in his mind had it not been for the tutelage of yourself, Professor James Small, and his other teacher, Ifudishi. He's like, there's no way. So, you know, we are just doing what we've been told to do. So I thank you so much, Dr. J, for laying the foundation.
Stay on the path, because clearly knowledge is power.
Yes.
And supreme knowledge is Africa is the key to Africa's spiritual development. And so get into the culture of sacred African things, African, not into the superficial things, but into the deep well of things African. And we've been fortunate to have had elders lead our path. Reverend James H. Robinson, a Black man up from the deep bottoms of Tennessee, where African peoples were forced to live in the lowlands and white folks lived in the upper part, and their septic tanks, when they overflowed during the rainy seasons, spilled onto Black folks' homes. So Reverend Robinson, coming up from the bottoms, moved so heavily up to the top when he could be a giant in the world, not just in Tennessee or in Harlem, but a giant in the world. He gave us this Africanness, and he helped us, so many of us, understand that it's ours for the taking, ours for the making, and it will help to remake us into powerful humans with a mission, and it's a sacred mission.
Yes, it's a sacred mission. So you know what? I'm gonna show a part of so tonight we're gonna be showing some clips, not a lot, okay? Because we want to, we're just trying to wet your whistle here for this live stream. But I sat right in front as Dr. J delivered this speech, and I was just mesmerized the whole time. Sometimes I was laughing, and sometimes I was crying, and sometimes I was just like, what is he gonna say next? It was such a treat to have him oh my gosh. Okay, so I'm gonna stop talking about it because listen, I see someone else right here, Kazi. She said the same thing that I'm saying. I fell in love with him at the One Africa Unity Conference. I am definitely a supporter. That's what Cassie said. So I kind of loved Dr. J beforehand, but let me tell you, seeing him in that way, I was like, whoa, because this is, I always hear people talk about Dr. J's speeches and this and that, but to be able to sit and witness it and, just firsthand was really, it was such a treat. So, so Dr. J, I'm just, going to show some clips, and
yes.
You tell me, what you were thinking.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like that's so funny. Every time I talk to my kids when they do something, I'm like, so now what was your thinking behind that? But no, I do want to hear what was going on because you were just electrifying. All right, so we're gonna do the first one. Okay. And this is StreamYard, so it lags a little bit, guys. Okay.
When you grow up with strong women, African American women, you have to give thanks. Really do have to give thanks. And I've been blessed. Having all people, talk about mothers, aunties, people that want even your blood claiming you and taking.
We've lost the sound.
They took that away from us.
Can you guys hear the sound?
Urban renewal
Yes,
and urban removal.
We missed it, but it's back. The sound is back.
Oh, it's back? Okay.
That crackers have. I know that you all love crackers. I mean, look, we're trained to love crackers. When you grow up, you got graham crackers. You got saltine crackers. You got cheese-in crackers. Crackers everywhere. Crackers everywhere. Ain't nobody done no analysis on what crackers do to black people. Salt, sugar, molasses. breathing, a science of breathing, a science of walking through the world. That's what the Nile Valley was. That's what the great civilizations of African people, science relating to nature. And that allows you to nurture the mamas, the breasts, babies. We had that, thank you all these mamas. And then she got two big giants. She needs help. So when she came to help.
Okay. All right. Wait. Okay. Okay, this is a little. Oh. Okay. Wait, let me stop it. Okay. So Dr. J, what were you like? What when you started talking? What was that about? Like this first section.
Well, you move on spirit in the sense that we were in our space. We had created sacred space. And it was clear that this was not a normal gathering. This was a gathering of minds and bodies and spirits. And the time was right. What time is it? It's nation time. That's what we used to say in the 60s and 70s. But now we've expanded that. What time is it? It's time for African transformation. It's time for African renewal. And by African, we mean all people of African descent. We're not just talking about continental Africans or Africans who have had gone through the school systems and have their PhDs and their BBDs and their DVDs and all. We're talking about us as a sacred people on the planet. We're the foremost. We're the leaders of the planet. We've initiated the human experience. We can't take a back seat to others who are envious and jealous and who could create a mind just as we had just a few days ago coming out of New York State, a mind of a white person who had a plan, a calculated plan to murder as many Black people as he could. So we have to understand we've had to find a way through that. He ain't the first, he ain't gonna be the last. And it ain't gonna be just men, it's gonna be women and there's be elders, etc. People who want to smash and crush the African part of the human family. And our obligation is to raise it up and to let it shine bright on the rest of humanity. People who built pyramids in terms of their culture, who built temples, who got control of river valleys, who built great dams so the rivers could be controlled. People who studied the stars, the movement of the heavenly bodies, who understood the importance of the sun in the universe of universes. And so that's what we are. We're the special star people of the universe. We're the special spirit people of the universe. We're the special scholars who understand that that scholarship is not used to abuse and to damage and to hurt and to destroy, but to do what? To build for eternity, not just to get a degree, not just to get a few dollars, but build the human family on a path for eternal development and understanding. And so, fortunately for me and the people I grew up with, that was a part of the process. I grew up in Newark, New Jersey, in a village that's a part of Newark, New Jersey. Just like we had villages in St. Louis and Detroit and Chicago. The village is the African space where you can have what I call the 3 C's at work. 3 C's: communal, living together; cooperative, working together; collective, sharing In other words, our villages were not just for survival, they were for growth and development. So the concept of HAPI, using our resources to help continue our great movement through time, is what we've come into. And so this is marvelous that young people have been able to take it and move it into even more powerful ways than previously thought of it. And with the HAPI activity, it was a family affair. I mean, when you got into that big space that we were using, you moved past the hallways where all these vendors were. And I've been into conferences after conference over the years, but I've never felt such warmth, such support at these conferences. And then to go into the main space, and there at the door was one of the queen mothers. And she didn't have a big sign, but the fact that she is at the entrance to the great happening meant that this person was important. And come to find out that she had some kind of relationship to Felicia. I'm not sure what it was. Somebody said it's her auntie, or somebody said it's her mommy, and somebody
it
said
was my mother. It was my mother. She was so excited.
was.
Yeah.
And you could feel her as you went into the place. The place was protected by her spirit. It wasn't going to be so. She wasn't mad. She was glad to see this is what my daughter has been doing, and this is the result of what her work is all about. And of course, we can testify here in the Jeffries household, because she has been coming here, bringing her strength, bringing her wisdom, bringing her patience. Never seen her in a negative mood. Even if she was, she would step outside the door and do it on the porch. But in this home, she walks like it is a special space, helping my wife be an international educator, not somebody who's just doing it for the job, but somebody's doing it because we've been trained to be missionaries of the African knowledge and the African spirit. Everybody who's touched us in significant ways have had this type of mission. So that's why I call it our sacred mission. If you're going to marry somebody, it's a sacred mission. If you're going to have some babies, it's a sacred mission. If you understand that you have a responsibility to take care of your elders, it's a sacred mission. And so we are a sacred mission. Not just to generate money. You have to do that in order to survive, but it's to elevate. And so we describe this period of our elevation as the African Renaissance. And when you go to these European schools like my wife and I have, PhD for her at Yale and work at NYU, and my PhD at Columbia, and work not only in American schools like Lafayette College in Eastern Pennsylvania, but to have studied in Europe with the elite of the European world. And then you can see, as the Europeans try to train their people to be leaders, there we are in their midst, learning to see the world in its larger dimension. And so education is the key, but not the type of education that unfortunately, the white nature of things has forced us into worshiping white folks. Now, can you imagine? As little kids, we worshiped Santa Claus. Now, we didn't have any chimney, so it was hard for us to put two and two together. Well, how come those gifts was there, spread out? And I had so much brainwashing around the Santa Claus. That's why I'm raising it. Because my older cousins used to make fun of me. And they used to say, that dumb so-and-so, little Lenny, he's still talking about he saw Santa Claus. And in my mind, I saw the sucker sitting in the kitchen eating my mother's pies and cakes. And so you can't get it out of my mind. I can still see him. See that sucker in my kitchen. We didn't have no chimney, so he must have come through the front door. But we have been brainwashed and we are stuck into someone else's world. But we're free. We're freeing ourselves now. We got the freedom. Find that truth.
Let me tell you.
And live by it.
Yes. Yes. You know, Dr. J, man, you know, I know you, when we always chat, you always thank me for coming over. But let me tell you, it's like you guys give me life coming over here and hanging out with you, you know, and I feel like elders who are not like, I know we had Dr. Melville on one time, and she was talking about the difference between old people and elders. She's like, old people, sometimes people are just old and bitter, but then there's elders who want to impart their wisdom. They want to make sure that you can carry on the things that they, you know, laid out for you. And I tell you, it's just an honor to be able to be one of those people. You have lots of daughters and you have lots of sons that come over here. So I'm just glad to be one of them. I love hanging out with you. Yeah. I definitely have a good time with you and all your books. You have lots of books. There's a few back. Just a few back here.
It looks like, yes, you are not only, you cannot.
I look very studious.
Yes, you got the books on one side of you, and then in back of you, you have this fantastic kente cloth. That's the special cultural tradition of the Asante people and many other people in the Akan people in Ghana. They developed this beautiful cloth, but you know, don't tell anybody, because we do things at a superficial level. Because if you don't have the deep knowledge, you really can't operate in that deep environment. But I've been searching for this deep knowledge, and my wife has been, and my brother and others have been. My brother's into universal Goju, a special Africanized martial art, and his wife, Sister Rosie, she's she's heavy into her spirituality. But that cloth that you have in the back, don't tell the power folks about it, because and sometimes you just are disobedient. I have that streak in me of sometimes doing the wrong thing. One of the greatest of the African leaders, the kingmaker, Bafo Aseo Kuto, he adopted a special link with me, just as the chief priestess who defends the Ashanti people and protects the golden stool developed a special relationship and appreciation of my wife, Dr. Raza, Nana Mbibio, that's her African stool name. Well, the chief linguist who saw something about me, he actually came to this house and visited us. On the couch that I'm turning my head to now, he sat there and he talked about African tradition, and that we had to appreciate it because it was deep. And then he got into giving a lesson. In other words, the Sons of Africa were here because they were part of our protective crew. And he decided to teach me in front of these young men who I was their leader, if you will. And his teaching was by a parable, by a story. And so he said, you know, Dr. J, that that cloth is a very important part of the Asante tradition in Ghana. In fact, when the great king of Asante was invited to be entertained by the great king of England, and he was invited to the great hall in England, we had a particular dilemma. And so here he's trying to teach me, and he's creating this story. And he said that the king and his entourage walked into the palace of the English royalty. And when they got into the hall, they saw before them a banquet table. And the banquet table was covered with a beautiful kente cloth. And then he had to tell the king and the others of the entourage that we have to halt here. And he said, we really have to leave the special place. Now, what he told us was that kente cloth is sacred. It's to be worn. It's not to adorn a table with some foodstuffs on it. So he walked out with the king. Now, what he was trying to tell me is that even though you're a part of our tradition and we love you and we honor you and we want to elevate you, we can't let you do stupid things that are not right. So in other words, that kente cloth he was looking at a whole wall full of kente cloth. I had to take it down, and I knew how to follow my instructions from him. And so we took the kente cloth, a wall of beautiful kente cloth down, and we folded it up and put it away. But it didn't stay away long because I wanted a favor from him. The Reverend Calvin O'Butts, the minister of one of America's greatest churches, white or black, Abyssinian Baptist Church in Harlem. The Reverend Calvin O'Butts was one of our teachers at the Black Studies Department. His wife was one of our students. And he had been working hard to replace the great preachers who lead the Abyssinian Baptist Church, which included the great Congressman Adam Clayton Powell and his father before him, the Reverend Powell, who helped to build the Abyssinian Church. And so he was being installed the weekend coming up as the preacher. And this was a great honor that the church had decided to make him the chief preacher at the Abyssinian Baptist Church. And so he said he wanted a special celebration to me. And he didn't come right out and say what it was, but I said, are you Reverend Butts, asking us to celebrate in the African tradition? And he said yes. And so we mapped out a plan that on Friday we would have a celebration in the African tradition, which would be an installment. And installment means bringing a person into leadership and having him swear an oath to the tradition. And so that was Friday. On Saturday, they would have a dinner at the Hilton Hotel. And on Sunday, they'd have the official installation in the church sanctuary. And so that was the plan. And so I had the courage to ask this elder, who was the kingmaker, could he stay another week and actually perform the ceremony of installment? I would assist him, but this would be done officially by him. And we did. We improvised. We had an African stool in which the person sits on. We had a sack In the African tradition, you have gold weights that represent knowledge and power and riches. So we had a leather case in which we had not the gold weight symbols of the Akan, but we had books of the scholars that we were using as our gold weights. And so we had this unbelievable, wonderful ceremony. His son, he had 35 kids and several wives. 35 kids and several wives. The youngest one was studying stocks and finance on Wall Street. And so he wanted to Africanize his son since he was going so headstrong into Wall Street. So him and I just knew how to communicate. And he said that his son came to America without cloth. Now, Africans in their deep culture go with their cloth, with their jewelry, with their symbols. That's a part of their deep culture. And so this young man did not have his cloth. So I said he should take the cloth. We will give him the cloth that was taken down off of my wall, and he will wear that at the sacred ceremony being performed by his father. And that's what we did. And so to see these people living the culture with us is most marvelous. And so that's why we're in the period of what we're calling the African Renaissance, you know. And it is truly something that we need to appreciate and have the Africans assist us move to higher levels and have our special position in the so-called New World link up with the Old World. One of our great scholars, Dr. Shekanta Diop, the greatest mind that I've ever known to walk the planet like ordinary human beings. Dr. Diop, he believed that the light of the new world for African peoples was going to come from the West. It was going to come from people in the new world, and it was going to bring back power and force for the African continent. So when we're talking about the African Renaissance, it is a process that we are about, and we're guided by important traditional folks and by the spiritual consciousness that they passed on to us, and we've tried to raise up.
Well, you know, it's interesting that you're talking about this because I want to speak to what you were saying. I just want to first just give some shout outs to some people that are contributing. Thank you, LL, for your contribution. Lori Johnson, we missed her at the conference, but she was on that live stream with us, Lori Johnson. And I want to give a special shout out to Sean Richardson. So, Dr. J, remember at the conference when you were saying no one can talk to you unless they are down with HAPI, and you put up your $1,000 and said you were going to no, actually you gave us a blank check, but and you were just like, you were starting the ball running. Well, Sean Richardson and his wife literally donated some dough to us, which was super cool. And he's in the chat right now still donating. So Sean, thank you. Thank you so much. And, we are always.
Sister Felicia, we need more of that. In other words, that blank check eventually became a check for $3,000.
Yes.
And so that's how we build. We build together. Spiritual relationships. The 3 C's: communal, cooperative, and collective. Building together. And so you can't work a plantation by yourself. You can't build a church by yourself.
Yeah.
You can't manage a lodge, because the Africans had this tradition of the women having their special women's association working together, and the men have theirs. And so those type of brotherhoods and sisterhoods, even white folks have copied. So you got the Masonic tradition, and you have the Rosicrucian tradition, and you have the Catholic tradition. And so we're following the best of our traditions when we learn to share. And so people should know that sacrifices have been made by yourself and our brother Taki in an enormous way. And so that, but if there's 100 of us and there's only maybe 30 of us who could make a $500 to $1,000 donation, that's the money that's needed. You can't have this activity that we're involved in without the monies, and you can't ask people to go in their own personal possession because they've got to survive and thrive. And the spirit at the activity was such that it was time for us to tap into our special resources and build together. The pyramids were not built by individuals, they were built by collective, communal, cooperative, and collective working together.
Yeah. And the thing about it is that we're very clear and we're very conscious about when you guys donate money to us, that we literally use it on other Black people. So like the beautiful books that you're seeing, that's that's a Black person, that's our Black graphic artist who works. And even the guy that's doing the live streaming. And then let me tell you about the live stream people. I'm just going to just digress for a second. The live stream team was oh my God, I had, I kept, I was there looking at the conference, but then I looked on my phone at the live stream. I was like, oh my God, like it looked beautiful. They did an excellent job. And it's so funny because out of all the people that, they were on it, they had every single person they would go on to, they had 3 cameras set up, but you, Dr. J, you was running. I was like, when I was looking at this video, I was like, where's Dr. J? I was like, he's running. In fact, I'm going to show another little clip. Let me show a little clip of you. So I was like, this little 85-year-old man is getting it in. I think we can't even keep up with him. Okay. I'll tell you, the technology piece today is doing some little funky things. Okay. Always something.
And this one too, it tells me, in my own house, I have to go into the back. I got my library there and stuff, so I'm comfortable there. I can get my. She'll leave the house. Jay, I'm leaving. She's at home. She's at home. The relationship they have is an extraordinary relationship that needs to be reported. I'm sure. Look, their love that they show each other is extraordinary. But that's the same love that we had to do on the plantations. That's the same love we had to do with Panthers, saying they wanted us to be in their communities while they were planning the lynching that was going to take place for entertainment next week. We got to learn to love ourselves unconditionally. That's why I never go anywhere without, I don't go nowhere without my weapons of mass destruction. Hey, 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 hey. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jehovah. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for these weapons of mass destruction. Number 1 on the list, Dr. Chancellor Williams. This is not his classic work. The classic work is the destruction of Black civilization. That this brother from South Carolina was outlining how they mess with your mind and mess with your behind and mess with everything that you got going. So that's a classic work. But this is his later work when he met more of these scholars and did more research and got rebuffed in these Black institutions that call themselves Black colleges. They're really Negro colleges. They're afraid to be Black. They're afraid to be African. They're definitely
Yeah, the Renaissance.
Wow.
Yeah. You said wow, huh?
Yes. I mean, in other words, Chancellor Williams was an extraordinary person. And he was a highly melanized person. He wasn't like Du Bois. Du Bois had this mixed background of Dutch and German and this and that. But Chancellor Williams was a serious melanized black man who led the way to opening up this path. And he went and visited dozens of African countries when it wasn't easy. And so we have to appreciate that he represents a certain type of grit, toughness that comes out of our community, and it's hardened by the negative experiences that they transform into a source of power. And that Chancellor Williams, he is a Capricorn. Now, I don't want Capricorns to get excited. You'll just relax. Chancellor Williams is a Capricorn. Dr. Joseph Ben Yakinen, Dr. Ben is a Capricorn. Dr. John Henry Clark is a Capricorn.
Yes, is his birthday is the first of you.
Dr. Ben is the 31st, and then in the next hour or two, it's the first. It's Dr. Clark. So we used to celebrate them together.
Wow,
and
nice.
Then we have John Hope Franklin, a Capricorn. He's one of the great scholars, and he comes out of that enormous scandal of Tulsa, where they burned down the prosperous black community. His family was a part of that, and he becomes one of our top scholars, and with others sitting at his feet, etc. So Dr. Shekanta Diop, Capricorn in December. I have two nephews. They're doing fine. One is a political leader, and that's Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, and he graduated at the top of NYU Law School, and he was the graduation speaker. His younger brother is a historian, and he graduated at the top of Morehouse College. In 4 years at Morehouse, he disgraced the family, because after 2 years, he had all A's, but he had one B. And when I asked him, I said, well, what are you trying to do? You're bringing down the dignity of our family and our standards. And he said, well, Uncle Lenny, I should have gotten an A in that class. Well, I said, what class was it? He said, religion. I said, you damn sure should have gotten an A. Your mother's been taking you to church every Sunday that you can imagine. And he said, I think I got an A in the class. I said, well, go back to the professor and tell him you to look at it. So he did, and the professor said, yes, it should be changed. But he didn't, the professor didn't worry about the change, and neither did Hassan. So when he graduated in Morehouse, he had all A's except one B in religion. Now, do you know how phenomenal that is, to have a person that tenaciously seeking to rise to a plateau? But the beautiful thing, and this is the beauty of these stories in my life, is that I was huffing and puffing mad because the graduation was there. There was 10,000 people on the lawn, the elite of Black America and the elite of Morehouse. And but I was mad because the valedictorian wasn't my nephew, because of that one grade. And so I was walking, hoofing and mad, walking through the crowd, etc. And all of a sudden, I came across about 15 people, most of them women. And I looked up at this group of 15 sitting together on the lawn, and I said, well, who are these people? And so I was curious, and I asked them, and they said they were from Plainfield, New Jersey. So I said, well, that is wonderful because I'm from Jersey. And come to find out that, and so just by seeing these children dressed in African cloth with their leadership, I mean, that took the negative spirits away from me and the negative thoughts. And so my spirits were lifted high. And so this brother had a chance to speak at the graduation. He was the graduation speaker. And my nephew should have been in that position. But this brother gave a fantastic presentation, and he was the first person of the so-called Negro colleges to receive a fellowship, a Rogues Fellowship. I didn't say Cecil Rhodes, I say Rogue Fellowship. In other words, named after this brother who helped to crush Black people in Africa to get the gold and the diamonds out of South Africa, Cecil Rhodes. But this brother won this fellowship, and so I was happy. You know, my personal thing I had to put aside. And he did such a good job making his presentation that he was too Black, too strong. And so they brought the choir up on him. You know, that's how they do in Black churches and places. You know, if you're going too strong, they're not going to slip you a note, but they're going to go to the choir or something. And so they brought the choir to tell him that your time is finished. But I wanted to greet him because he did such a good job. And then what happened was the press, since he's the first Black to go on one of these fellowships, they were all interviewing him about his success. And so I kept my ground. And then he had his brother with him. And so the brother happened to spot me, and he came up and said, Dr. Jeffries, how you doing? I said, I'm fine. And he said, and I told him, I said, I really appreciate your achievement and your brother's achievement. And I'd like to honor him, you know, with a hug. He went back to his brother with all the press around him and told his brother that Dr. Jeffries wanted to greet him. He ran away from the press, came up to me, got on his knees. I pulled him up off his knees. I said, brother, this is your day. All I wanted to do is acknowledge it. And come to find out that that group of 15 women, family, that was his family. Of all of the pageantry of the ceremony, the one solid African thing was his family, and he was being so honored. So that's why we have to understand and appreciate and take a positive view on these things, African. And then link Africa, the continent, with Africa, the islands of the West Indies, with Africa, South America, all the way down through Brazil, with Africa, the islands of the Pacific, and see that we are a global people. And so happy, not just around the Nile, but happy around the universe. And hey, you can be sad, but it's better to get glad that you're African.
You know what? You and this rhyming thing, I tell you, I love it.
Hey.
I love it.
But the beautiful thing is that the continuation of the activity with the conference, and I may have overdid it a little bit with my enthusiasm. And of course, my wife is always there to pull my tail and say, look, slow it down. You know, that's where that goes. And just my mother was that same way. She, you know, do your thing properly, but don't overdo it. And my mother taught me how to win. And she said, I'm going to put you in these editorial contests. And at Oakwood Avenue, church, they had this annual conference of these young men and women competing with each other on these debates. And it was unfair competition because the young fellows and young girls were not just competing with me, they were competing with me and my mother. And my mother had a good head on her shoulder. And she had trained me not only how to speak, but how to hold your presence. And not only how to hold your presence, make sure that you had a palm card in your hand. And she had learned that because she was Eastern Star. She was part of the women in these various different groups. And so the young people never were able to beat me because they were competing not just against me, they were competing against me and my mother. And so I'd be looking at my palm card and coming up with all these fancy things, etc. But so you have to have that foundation. And my wife talks about her mother coming up from South Carolina. And with her desire to see her young people do something, she sent them out to the museums and other places and pushed high. And so her brother was, her older brother, brilliant. He spoke many languages and mastered that skill. And so we have to let our children know the sky is the limit.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Excuse me.
So I'm just going to show. I'm going to show a little bit of what new. It's kind of like the lead on. You know what? Let me tell you, this is probably one of the hardest things to kind of go through and get like one little nugget because you kind of. I mean, you were here, but then you brought us back here, and then you had a through line. It was like beautiful. But I'm going to play a little bit about like right before you talk about Dr. Rosalind Jeffries. Okay, I thought that was really sweet. And for those that were there, I know you guys were around this roller coaster with me. Yeah, right there. And peace to Steve Boyd. Thank you for your donation. Yeah, we're gonna. Steve is doing a lot of great things. He had an event.
How come the sisters are not competing with the brothers? Usually, the sisters do a better job of raising some money.
Well, no, we had Lori. No, Lori LL gave money.
Okay.
We do a little something over here, you know.
All right.
I mean, we can make it a girl versus boy thing. We can and see what who can raise the most money tonight. We can definitely do that. But that's the thing, not we're very appreciative of this Cash App love. Because we have lots of things, lots of fun things we're going to be talking about this summer. So thank you guys. This money is very well spent. Okay, so I'm going to let this one play just for a few minutes. It's so good. All right.
It ain't what you've been thinking. It's your spiritual transformation. This one keeps me honest. I have to tiptoe through the tubes. My own apartment, paying the head. We got a home that's worth $700,000. Really, it's only worth about $40,000, but they got there $700,000. She tells me what to do. Do this and that, and turn the lights off. She got that from her Harlem village, where her father and mother would say, "We ain't got no money to waste on no lights. Turn it off." But when you're in a big house, you want to have some lights around because you want people to know that somebody's home. Rosalind ain't thinking about that. She's thinking about the light bill. But look, this is the best partner you can have in life.
Let me tell you. Yeah, for some reason the volume is just kind of low when we're putting it through StreamYard. I don't know what's up with that. Because the audio was beautiful. Our sound engineer was really great. So, Dr. Jeffries, that right there, let me tell you, the fact that you were bending down, you bent down twice and kicked your leg up 2 times during this during this whole time. And I was like, you just jumping around like you were like 25 years old. I was like, what is going on? I've never seen you like this. You was getting it in. So what were you like? I know you didn't I know you didn't think you were going to be doing all this while you were preparing for your speech. I don't know. Maybe you were. I don't know.
Well, the quality of the people that came together, the brother who emceed, and the care that people took in filming. I mean, it was just done so right, and so you were glad to be a part of it, and then to have so many of our people who were there, they were outside vending in the auditorium, and then they came inside to participate. So it really was magic the way it had been set up, and then all over that first floor, you had these vendors who looked like they had a new life by coming into this. We had talked about HAPI and the economics, but it was happening. Everybody was interacting and they were happy. So really, we had said that it's about stocks and crops. So we had a perfect example of what that meant. People were there, they were greeting and meeting, and they were selling the materials that they had, the books that they had.
And trips. There was a group that was taking people to Tanzania.
Yes.
Yeah, and you talking about Dr. Ken Harris. He runs the National Business League.
Okay.
He was our MC.
Yes.
Yeah. He kept you guys were like the Jamaican 4x100 relay racers. You were just handing the baton. You guys were awesome.
Well, if we want to add that part of the history to it, it's very interesting. Dr. Clark, our mentor, took us, several of our scholars, well, he took 20 of us almost, out to a conference in Los Angeles of the whites that controlled African studies. So he was not going anywhere by himself. He had his weapons of mass destruction, the books,
yes,
because even his mentor, who was not a college-trained person, was John Jackson. And he wrote Introduction to African Civilization, Man, God, and Civilization. And so that he always took those people who helped him, he took their materials and shared them. So Dr. Clark took us out to be a physical challenge to these white scholars who controlled the African studies movement. And what Dr. Clark did was he took a crew like Dr. Ronald Walters, who eventually became the head of Howard University's African studies. He took myself. He took people like our sisters, Herschel, Chalinar, and so Shelby Lewis. All of these are people working on their doctorate and whatnot. So when we presented, we knew it wasn't jive. This was a serious challenge to white folks controlling our history. And when I saw the white people, scholars falling asleep when some of their people was presenting, I said, this is terrible. A person comes all the way out to Los Angeles to present at this big conference, and here these old white people falling asleep. So I said, they ain't gonna fall asleep on me. I'm gonna wake their butts up. And so I really gave a very powerful presentation. And so what we asked was parity. We wanted to be a part of the organization, and we wanted parity, meaning we should have equal. And they said, well, that's a big decision. We have to let our board decide that. So they said, next year, when you have a meeting, we have a meeting, we'll consider it. Well, we didn't trust white folks, and but we had to accept that. And next year we went to Montreal, and they had their conference at Montreal, and of course they didn't honor their pledges. And so our young Tiger Cubs under Dr. Clark said, we can't take it. We're going to have to upset this conference. And so after we upset the conference, we walked out. And we said, we're going to set up our own. And so we did. And we met at Howard University, and we set up the African Heritage Studies Association. And that organization challenged the white organization for who is going to control African studies. And so in 72, a few years later, we met in Ethiopia, the major international conference. And we met in Ethiopia, and the host was Emperor Haile Selassie. And it was so wonderful to have 200 or so white scholars there. And he, being the emperor that he was, he knew how to treat people, etc. But he gave us special treatment. We had a chance to go to the crown room where the royal throne is, and he stood before the royal throne for at least 2 to 3 hours and shook everybody's hand. And when him and Dr. Clark faced each other, I could see and feel the light between the two of them. And I never forgot that. And so that's the great coming together of the families that we've been able to operate around. And so when you have Shelby Lewis, she has organized the Black Political Science movement. I was part of the African Heritage movement. So we combine conferences. That's unheard of. One national organization has its own conference, but we said, let's combine 2 or 3 of the conferences together. And so we a different approach. We're together and unfolding this knowledge. And then, of course, we had this great brother that Dr. Clark wanted to pair me with because he knew I spoke French, and that's Dr. Cheikh Anta Diop. And he might be considered one of the greatest scholars in the history of the world, but his demeanor was of someone who was sharing and caring and had great love. He didn't have arrogance, and he was a scientist, and he was a culturalist, and he had so many things that he could be proud of, but he knew that the light was going to come from us in the West and bounce back to the East. And so that is what HAPI can do in the sense of articulation of history, that it should be spread around the world. It's not limited to any one space. And we should encourage our people to read and to understand and make sure that the knowledge is shared. Eventually, we had a chance to go to meet one of the great white scholars in history. And this was on our way to England for the conference on African civilization. And Basil Davidson, because Dr. Clark said that your history is everywhere, including coming from white scholars. And Basil Davidson was a scholar, white, European, and he had written several important works on the African civilizations of West Africa and whatnot. And so we were at a conference that focused on the Sudan, and he had done several works in that area. So I appreciated what he did and the model that he set. And so my suggestion was that the next conference on Africa, like this one was on the Sudan and whatnot, I said the next conference should be on the African soil. We had come to England to have this conference, but we should have the next one in Africa itself. And see, that's the interesting thing, that we felt so comfortable with Africa that we could suggest these things. And so I got the resources together. We got Dr. Akinjobin, who was a great scholar from the University of Ife, and he came out of the University of Ibadan, and then he helped to set up the University of Ife. And so he agreed that we would have, instead of the Manding civilization of the Sudan that we had experienced, the next conference would be on the Yoruba civilization that Dr. Akinjobin represented. And so we've been able to move through the world with an objective and with goals and with models. And it's definitely putting a primacy of Africanness, but it's not eliminating those who come out of the Muslim tradition or the Hebrew tradition or the European tradition.
You know, you said something in the beginning. You were saying what it means to be African. And you said taking control of your mind. What do you, how does one start to take over their mind?
Well, for me, it was easy to make that dichotomy because as I grew up with this African component to my life, and then in the classroom, the Greeks were worshipped. And so I mastered the Greeks and white America, but at the same time, I had a chance to master the African component. And so, and then very few people are able to, I didn't go to the black school down south. I went to Lafayette College in Eastern Pennsylvania, although I was accepted into many colleges, Rutgers and Columbia and Penn University and these schools. And I went to Lafayette because they had two black people there, and one of them was my childhood buddy, Sonny Green, from the streets of Newark, New Jersey, and from the lots playing stickball and playing stoop ball and doing a ditty, doo-wops and all. So I was looking for an African friend as opposed to the prestige of a European school. And so when I got there, I had a chance to show my abilities. I still played my horn. I played college baseball. I became an elder of the college church. I also helped design the cover of my yearbook in high school. So I used that same art skill to help design the Lafayette College.
Oh, yes, where your buddy went.
And the Sonny Green, he was interested in becoming an engineer. And he, unfortunately, money was a problem. And he was not able to continue that. But there was, in that Jewish fraternity that I was in, another black youngster, and he was just the opposite to Sonny Green and myself. We were small in stature or average in stature, but this other brother that was there, he was from South Jersey, but he was a football player, and while Dan Wooten, and while in the fraternity, he even though he had a football scholarship, he was interested in becoming a medical doctor. Now, that's unusual to have a football player who wants to be a medical doctor, but he achieved it. He was a star footballer. He was the deputy Rex. I was the Rex, the king of the fraternity. He was the number 2. He was the star of the football team, and he went on to medical school. And a couple of years ago, he died in South Jersey, but he was very successful and went beyond football. And so that's why you have to take advantage of these opportunities if you can. One of our sister fraternities out in UCLA of this organization, Pi Lambda Phi, because when the people were rushing us, they said, we don't want you because you're black. We want you because you're talented, you have potential. And, we said, that didn't, we needed to have a space in place, but we wouldn't go for all that flattery. But they said that in Syracuse University, one of the persons pledging our fraternity up there is James Brown, Jimmy Brown.
Oh,
Now,
yeah. Okay.
He was one of the greatest football players who ever played college football. And he had pledged the fraternity, but I wasn't sure whether he went through, how far he went through. But out in UCLA, they said, we have a black leader there, and his name is Rayford Johnson. Rayford Johnson turned out to be one of the greatest athletes in the history of the world. He won the decathlon and other events. He just passed, and they had 3/4 of a page in the New York Times on his life. He was the president of the UCLA University campus, and he was the president of the Pi Lambda Phi fraternity. I have a picture of myself receiving a certificate from him, and myself walking away from the head table back to my seat. So the idea of being inspired by some of your people is real, and that's what we need to understand and develop the brotherhood, sisterhood, the family connection that make people successful. You stand on others' shoulders, and then you're able to reach up high.
Yes, and speaking of that, we're closing out, but I want to bring in this this gentleman who inspires all of us. How you doing, Professor?
I'm doing
You're a movie star coming in here. How you doing?
I was sitting down here doing some work, and then people called me from all over the country saying, Dr. Jeffries is on. I said, on what? I said, Dr. Jeffries is on HAPI. Sheila called me, Naja called me, 2 other brothers called. So I said, let me call Felicia.
You know what? Yeah, and let me tell you, after that speech you delivered at the Malcolm X site, I was like, I don't think you. Can you talk anymore? Like, you were oh my gosh! And listen, Dr. J, I didn't notice who's back here on your wall, right there.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well,
Well, Dr.
Brother
Jeffries probably have a longer relationship to Malcolm than any of us, because he was over in Africa at the same time Malcolm was in Africa and moving through Ghana at the same time Malcolm was moving through Ghana. He rarely talks about it,
yes.
but you know, he can tell us how they missed, because he had a task to do when he lost one of his brother and
And
Cross.
the Crossroads work camp, one
Yeah.
fellow died. He was from Canada. He died of malaria. And so while the family, Tom Feelings, and all the others were meeting with Malcolm because he was going to move on to Nigeria, and he was in Ghana, and everybody was glad to connect with him. I was trying to keep the connection too, but when this fellow died, I had the responsibility of going through the hospital in Corlebu and finding a vault in which to put the body. And that was rough because, and I was by myself. I was in charge of handling Crossroads leadership. And we did find, and after looking in several of these vaults and seeing arms and legs and all kinds of stuff, we did find a brother. And his family decided, since he loved Africa so, and that they wanted him to be buried in Africa. So he was buried in Ghana, and the schoolhouse that they built, the Crossroads program built in that village, Ahamufu, or wherever it was, they still celebrate the brothers. So I had a chance to be in the presence of Malcolm, but not be able to relate to him. Tom Feelings and the others were able to, and but the responsibility of appreciating Malcolm and the OAU, and then he set up the AAAU, African American organization. Then the spirit of Malcolm was there, and fortunately, Professor Small has the most unique relationship with him, and he was able to express it in such a way at the grave site that it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing, and
Yeah, it was amazing.
Malcolm transferred some of what was his inner consciousness. He passed it on to us, and Brother Small carries it more importantly and significantly than anybody else. And so we're all happy simply because the days before we had celebrated Mother Kefa, who was from the South, Georgia, and she helped with her partner, Bill Jones, develop the community forum that spread around the world. They had the forums in Brazil and in England and France and Holland. And so that process.
It's still going, Dr. Jeffries. I got a call a little while ago from Kohan Halevi.
Yes.
And he's with my daughter, Queen Diambi.
Right.
And they were sitting with Julius Garvey. And they're in Panama at the big conference.
Yes.
Celebrate traditional African leaders. And they're merging with the diaspora. It's a major conference in Panama, and I actually forgot about it. So they called from down there tonight. So to see that type of thing, and it's First World that triggered these kinds of forums that people are still doing. They don't know why they're doing it. Yes. They don't know where the genesis came from, but it's still happening all around the world now.
Well, that's what we need. We constantly have to meet strategically. We don't need to have song and dance. We need to have some heavy sessions, thinking through these problems, because when you see what's happening in the world today with that chaos in Ukraine and all of that mess, and then here comes this crazy white boy program to kill black people, and that's going to be replicated. so that we have to be armed with everything that we can arm ourselves to be able to continue our work of raising African people.
And we need to tell some of the crazy black ones they need to stand down before we start demonstrating in front of their office. Like Representative Meeks, I understand, is putting a resolution through Congress to sanction African nations that support the Soviet Union. And I think he was a part of those who sanctioned Zimbabwe.
Yes.
And we may have to start putting some sanction on the Negroes in Congress, because I just about had enough of it.
Yes,
and,
that's right.
You know, that's why I'm calling him out. I called him out last night. I'm calling him out now. This is somebody I used to move around with when he was young, and he had a little common sense in his head. He's from Grenada.
Right. Yes.
But no, some of these people have gone too far in their loyalty to these political parties instead of their loyalty to a black agenda when they get in office via these political parties.
Right.
People know how to carry their people's agenda. We go and carry the enemy's agenda.
That's true. That's true.
We have to call them on this stuff, and it has to stop.
Yeah.
That's why y'all got HAPI Talk. So a HAPI Talk got a talk.
We got a black agenda. We don't care about nobody else's agenda. What no one else is doing. We have a black agenda. We got to know our history. We got to tap into our African sacred sciences. We got to have our African mind and our behind. Isn't that what you say, Dr. J?
Yes.
African mind and behind. Yeah, like we're very clear about what we're doing over here.
And it's not a joke, because when we had the beautiful thing was because of circumstance, we had a chance to go to the Charles Wright Museum and have a celebration of us. And it turned out to be, it wasn't planned, but it was just wonderful that we were able to have a tour of that exhibit that was there. We were able to have some nourishing food. I was able to see the history of the Tuskegee Airmen, and it was class. It was class. African people doing the thing in the right fashion. And then the next day, Roz and I was received by the sister who has this special place, and they did the best they could to make us feel like we were at home, and we enjoyed it. And, so your hometown, Detroit, showed out.
Mm-hmm.
They showed up and showed out. Yeah. Yes. My mother is still talking about the conference and all the people. Because she's always hearing me talking about everybody. And she's like, she finally got a chance to see everybody. So that was super cool.
Yes.
Yeah, that was definitely cool. Professor, I wanted to ask you, now that you're on here, when you were sitting there, I don't know I don't know the number where I would go to it when Dr. J started talking about you and all the martial arts. Were you there when you were saying that? Because I know you had to race off to the airport at the very, very end.
No, but that's probably not the first time. We all studied, actually, Dr. Jeffries as our leader at City College. We had our own martial arts program that we called Tiariki.
Right, Tiariki.
We actually introduced the stick fighting to North America again, because no one was using that type of fighting methodology. And our sensei brother Greg White, who went to the Caribbean and studied under the elders in the Caribbean, the stick fighting, and brought it back to us. But we also had Sensei Mahalio, who was there even before Brother Greg came on the scene, and who still teaches my grandchildren today. And he's one of the great senseis who've done multiple martial arts movies. He's been, what do you call it, when you do all the dangerous thing? And he was a stunt man in multiple other movies. But he's one of the best martial artists in the country.
Yes.
We also had a couple of other senseis. We had Carlos Molina that taught us. Carlos taught jiu-jitsu. I mean, I studied at least 4 forms. I probably can't even swing my hands now anymore. But
what? No,
stayed,
I'm sure you can.
we stayed fresh.
No, I'm sure you can. You know what, Professor? I think you can, because if Dr. J got his leg up, he put his leg in the air. It was like 90 degrees in the air. So if he can put his leg in the air, I know you can. And you would just walk around like nothing. I tell you, you guys were so youthful. You know, we hear you guys talk and we know that you're elders, but the way you guys were moving around in that hotel was nothing elderly about y'all, you know, except for the knowledge piece. But you guys were, you know, you were definitely hanging.
But HAPI has created a phenomenal journey, and you know, I'm glad to be on the journey with you. I've been on the journey with Dr. Jeffries, who's my primary teacher in the African History Sphere, since '69, Dr. J. That's a long time.
Yes, that's right.
More than 50-something years.
Yeah,
Working together as partners, and to see HAPI grow into the kind of phenomena that it actually frightens those who thought they had silenced two things. I think they thought they had silenced the movement for unity and Pan-Africanism, because we're playing Pan-Africanism so shallow in so many centers that a serious discussion about unity and Pan-Africanism started taking place in HAPI in a way it wasn't taking place in many places. There are other forums where Pan-Africanism is held up and pushed very heavily. I don't want to take away from the work of the other brothers and sisters, but HAPI took it to another level. And then the other thing was the economic question. You see, the economic question is never put front and center.
Mm-hmm.
And in this instance, it was put front and center through the duration of HAPI from the creation of the film. And that economic piece is the piece they've always been able to bamboozle us on. Because, you know, Dr. Jeffries tells us that economics is the wealth in your environment. It's the wealth in your ecology. But it has to have a management system, and that's the political piece. That it teaches that manages our wealth. And so we've developed the political piece very well, but we didn't develop the instrument it was supposed to manage very well in the last decades. We did at one point in history. If you go back from 1865 to 1945, we were killing it with the black banks and the benevolent association and the credit unions and church unions and so forth. And they came after us and we didn't see it. We thought integration was about race mixing. No, integration was about black economic destruction.
Right.
And it was very successful. And so here we come back and say we're going to create a HAPI in the middle of Detroit, a HAPI in the middle of Harlem, a HAPI in the middle of Chicago, to revitalize and redevelop that black economic river and stream that was destroyed after 1955.
Right.
And it frightened a bunch of people. But we don't care. We're going to make it bigger than before.
No, it seemed like with everything that was coming up, it was like, you know, when we were like, dang, this is not going to happen, but then something better happened. You know, so yeah, that was definitely power to HAPI and being able to just, you know, to just get this word out.
Well, last night we had a chance to watch, and it was really wonderful. The story of Ida B. Wells.
Oh, wow. That's my girl. That's my first girlfriend, right?
Oh, it was the most magnificent thing of what she had to go through. And she did it. So we have missed telling her full story, but it's magnificent.
And that she was one of the founders of the Afro-American League in 1892. She was one of the founders of the Niagara Movement. She's one of the founders of the NAACP. Besides the work she did in fighting against lynching in this country, going all over the world to raise capital, raise awareness, Germany, France, England, as well as the United States. An extraordinary spirit.
And in fact, we think of our sisters sitting on the bus and causing a hell raising. But Ida B. Wells, she was on the train and they had to pull her off. She was fighting, and it reminded me so much of my mother, because when we used to go down to Virginia every summer, she would not accept those nasty cars that were put on in Baltimore and move into those nasty cars. She would make an arrangement with the black folks who handled the dining car, and we would be allowed to squeeze in there and eat we have our little shoebox of chicken and stuff like that. But my mother was able to slick those rules that said, no, black folk ain't supposed to be here. They ain't supposed to be there. And so when you saw Ida B. Wells doing it, and then going to the World's Fair and raising issues, putting it on the international agenda, so that I'm going to have to get another book on her and read it and look at something.
I'm writing something, and it's on the women. I'm not going to say much about it. I was inspired by but a tape I did before Baina did the Sheroes of the Haitian Revolution.
Yes.
About 6 years ago, I did something for the organization we have in New Rochelle, and it's called Phenomenal Black Woman. But it's a PowerPoint slide presentation, and I was a part of that process where I have 20 of what I consider phenomenal black women, starting from ancient Kemet to now.
Yes.
Looking at their contributions to our freedom around the world, because we've been at war for a couple of thousand years. It wasn't 400 years.
Right.
We've done well to have survived, let alone thrive, but we did both. And so Ida B. Wells is just one of those extraordinary black women. It's like when we talk about our sister who was did the hair, what's that?
Madam Walker.
Madam C.J. Walker. We forget there's a sister who taught Madam C.J. Walker.
Right.
From St. Louis, who had a college, Poro College, that she built. And Madam C.J. Walker used to work for her as a salesperson. And she was the first black business to be on display at the Chicago World's Fair.
Wow.
And she was really the first female millionaire in America. And so there's so much work we need to do to show our children these models and these examples to emulate. We don't need any white folks to show us nothing.
Right.
We have expressed ourselves in the world in such an extraordinary way for century after centuries after centuries, and especially with our women. When the Moorish brothers have their dialogue about the Moors, they need to realize that there was two types of Moors. There was them black folks who didn't mix with the Arab folks. Then there was the groups who was mixed with the Arab folks, who we tend to identify with too much with the Islamic stuff, because the black folks who was led by a woman named Amanatu, who came out of the Atlas Mountains and fought the Arab armies toe to toe for nearly 5 years before they finally was able to assassinate her on the battlefield.
Right.
She led her armies. And she made one mistake. She moved from fighting the guerrilla warfare that she was very successful at, and trying to fight a kind of an infantry warfare on the open plains. And that was not what they were best skilled at. But the fact of her history and her leadership is unknown to most black people. When we set up Sister Annie Malone's name, yes, that's the sister who had Poro College, who taught C.J. Walker. And Poro College was still open in the 1950s. I think they may be closed now. But these things in history we need to know to see how extraordinary we were, and that a lot of people tried to talk about marginalizing the African woman. That was not a part of Black American culture in the 1900s and the turn of the 20th century. Black women were leading all aspects of our community, right beside and most of the time ahead of the black men.
And that's why when we raise Malcolm, it's appropriate, the scholar warrior. But we cannot forget his partner for life,
Sister Betty.
Sister Betty. And she had an extraordinary role to play. James and I were close to her, and to see her going in Uganda and going to the top of the mountains to dedicate a park to Malcolm.
Mm-hmm.
And there were plenty of security, but there were so many little kids that it overwhelmed the security. She wasn't even worried about the security. She just wanted to embrace all those kids.
But
And
she
then-
did further than that. She pulled down the fence. They had put a makeshift fence up, chain link, like,
Yes.
I guess for security purposes. And
Mhm.
she went up to that fence and made them take it down.
Yes,
They
that's
could be
right.
with the people.
And then when she was in Ghana,
Mhm.
Minister Farrakhan had an important role to play, but he could not come. And so the person who helped to rededicate the great renewed memorial center was Dr. Betty.
For Kwame Nkrumah, when he was moved to the mausoleum where he
Yes.
now rests.
That's right.
It was Sister Shabazz that was took over,
That's right. Yes.
spoke on our behalf. But she was extraordinary. We were in Grenada together. We went other places in the country together, speaking and teaching and doing May 19th. She would move all around the country, and she would culminate that week on May 19th in Charles Memorial Chapel where her husband was buried. That's how she would end the week of celebrating Malcolm's life.
Right.
And she would come there to help raise funds for the Charles Memorial School. Dr. Jeffries, myself, Ozzie Davis, and others who would always be with her every year. That was the last place we saw her, Dr. Jeffries,
Right. Yes.
before she passed away, that May 19th. And her and myself was there. She sat in the car and we were talking.
Mhm.
I remember the last thing she told me, she said, "You going back to Africa this summer?" He said, "Yes." So you and Dr. Jeffries go to Africa all the time. You don't bring me any gifts or anything. He said, "This time when you go to Africa, I want you to bring me a beautiful dress." Now, if you're from South Carolina and somebody asked you that, you know that's death.
Yes.
And being out of our space, we didn't realize that. Yeah, if somebody tell you to go and buy them a beautiful dress, you don't do that.
Right.
I'm from the root country. That's just the way it works. But I wasn't in my spiritual space. I was in the Negro space,
Right.
but I didn't pick it up.
Well, she had that African female spirit, and she tried to work with Alex Haley. It was rough, but he had promised to help money with the children, and he wasn't able to do what he needed to do simply because he had signed contracts with white folks, and they got most of his money.
Mm.
But she really fought for the spirit of Malcolm. I remember once I was at a big conference in Chicago, and I said something critical of Malcolm.
Oh, yeah.
He met me in the hallway, and she said, "Malcolm knew everything, and I don't want you saying he had any limitations." And then she looked at the medallion I had, which was a beautiful medallion, and she said, "I like that." And she just took it. I said, "Yes, go on, Betty." So she was a wonderful spirit, handling all that. And back of me is a picture of Malcolm and Muhammad Ali, and it's with three of the girls, including Ilyasha and Jamila and the oldest girl. But Betty is in that picture, James. But they cut her out. She's
Yeah, I have the picture. She's standing in the back to the right.
Yeah, and so that. But no, it was a fantastic experience for us to have some of these great leaders move through our world and continue to inspire us.
And the key thing, I know you got to go, Chal. I know you really need to wrap this up. But there was one more incident that always reminded me of Sister Betty. And when Sonny Carson and the others were trying to get the street near Medgar's name after Malcolm Boulevard, and the police had lined the streets and was blocking the streets to stop the Bubadika and the people who was marching down, Dr. Shabazz could see this from her office window. So she put on her coat and she came downstairs and she put herself at the head of the march, and it was like opening the Red Sea. The cops just moved the hell out of the way. That was Malcolm X's widow, Dr. Betty Shabazz.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Wow.
Yeah. You know, we have that. Our story is what we should be using as lullabies to our children every night.
Mhm.
Our story is what at least one day in every household, 2 hours should be contributed to just telling our story every week. 2 hours every week. We will change the world. Because what somebody made clear to me that made the difference about Malcolm was that most of the other leaders were speaking to the white folks, but Malcolm was speaking to Black folks.
Right.
And so what we need to do is speak to ourselves, speak to
Mhm.
our children, right? And we're not short on leaders and examples and models in any category you want to come up with.
Right. And then the incidents that we have to weave together would be very interesting simply because Martin Luther King's widow was on her way to Peking for the Women's World Conference.
Mhm.
And she was stopping in Zimbabwe and Kenya on her way there. And the beautiful thing was that Prime Minister Mugabe, the head of
ZANU-PF and Zimbabwe.
right, he decided to honor her like a head of state. And it was the most fantastic thing. They had a state dinner, and they had us at the big hotel, and each of us were paired to have a Mercedes, a white Mercedes, to take us over to the State House. And when I got there, well, I was in the hotel, so I was ready to get into my cab, but my buddy, Ron Walters, he had to go to the little boy's room. So instead of him going to the little boy's room on the first floor, he went upstairs to the bedroom. By the time he came down, our Mercedes was gone. And so I said, well, now we're in trouble. How are we going to get there? I said, we can grab a cab. So we went over to a cab, and the cab said, we can't go near the State House. So we worked out a deal. You get us as close to the State House as you can go, and then we will hoof it the rest of the way. And sure enough, he dropped us off. And Ron is a good athlete. I mean, he beat me running up the Zimbabwe ruins there. And so Ron and I was running to try to get in. We got to the door, and the people finally did open it up when we said we were supposed to be a part of the group. And so we got in, and we were happy because they had a reception there. But this fellow who was supposedly responsible for letting us in, he was all nervous and whatnot. I said, brother, relax. We're happy now. We're inside. We're in with the people. And he kept doing nervous things. And what he was trying to do was to keep an eye on us because they were moving in 2 chairs to the head table with Mugabe and Mrs. King. And so finally they brought us in, and we were sitting there at the head table. And Mrs. Mugabe, who was from Ghana, so we were very friendly. And she had said her husband stayed up all night listening to you on the Zimbabwe television. And he kept pounding on his desk. That's a teacher. That's a teacher. That's a teacher. And so these are the type of experiences we've had, which helped to enrich what we did because the people appreciated it. And so no one knows that story about Mrs. King being honored. And she was happy to be. She went out to that Zimbabwe memorial of the warriors fighting, and she berated her son, Martin Sr., because he forgot the camera. And so they had to go back and get the camera so that they could have some pictures at the memorial of the Zimbabwe struggle. So these are the things that we need to make sure don't slip into history and get lost. We need to put some of that out there. to see how our people have tried to make a way out of no way.
So we're gonna let Sister Felicia make a way out of nowhere now. I know she got to close down. I see her face.
Yes. Well, yeah. Well, you know what? I do want to close out, but I want you to close out with something you said earlier. I just want you to repeat it when you talked about a HAPI and what the attention and what people saw in HAPI happening, and or like, you know, really what was it that made certain people decide like, okay, wait, whoa, this ain't what we thought this was about. Can you just talk about that one more time? It was really powerful.
Dr. J is the one that laid it out in a way that I really got it when he told us that economic, politics, and culture must be married to one another, that you can't have one without the other. Mm-hmm. And HAPI kind of embodies that. And much of our struggle in the last few years have been the political agenda, the ideological agenda, to try to change policies. But we have not launched, even though Claude Anderson, Dr. Anderson, and others have been pushing it, we had not launched the economic agenda in the way HAPI came forward with it. HAPI came like with stormtroopers' boots and say, this is about economics. And we've taken it all the way back to the Nile to find an example of how it was done then. And let's replicate that model now in terms of its fundamental principles and taking control of economic, politics, and culture in the Black community, controlling land, labor, and resources in the Black community, being able to provide food, clothing, shelter, safety for the Black community. No one else was saying all of that the way HAPI has been saying it, and that we were setting up models. We weren't trying to just talk about history. We were talking about why the history and how the history could be used to build economics in Detroit, to build economics in Harlem, to build economics in Chicago. Mm-hmm. And then at the core of the cultural part of it, where your ethic, moral principles was installed upon your political leadership, we put the spiritual essence right at the core of that. And so it was the discussion of four things: the discussion of our spirituality, a discussion of our culture, a discussion of our economics, and a discussion of our politics, but in a family connection. And then we discussed how it could work in any community in America or in Africa or the Caribbean right now. And I think it was beginning to catch on because we saw the numbers who was listening to us. We saw the numbers who was listening to HAPI Talk, but others was watching those numbers too.
Yeah.
You see, others was watching those numbers too.
Yeah. That's why it's family. It's really important for you guys to support. You know, support comes in all different types of ways. Definitely money. Money helps us to be able to do things and keep doing what it is that we're doing. You know, it all these different building blocks that we're doing, you know, they all have a financial number that's attached to it, but also support also comes in this, like these emails, these text messages, you know, you guys liking and sharing this video, sending this information out, like really helping to get this, you know, this piece of the movement going. And so we're very appreciative. And I'm very appreciative of YouTube, because, you know, you guys have been there in the beginning, still in it. You guys were out there just, you know, petitioning for us, and just thank you. Thank you. All right. So you know what? I'm going to close now. But I want there was you know, we had an alternate ending to HAPI. But then we, you know, Taki took it out, but it's this idea that you were talking about, Dr. J, in terms of, you know, this idea of knowing your history and why it's important. So I'm going to show this like little clip of that, and then I'll go into the ending. You guys have any last words before I do that?
Don't ask Black folks to have a last word. That don't have a good connotation.
I know, you know what? Yeah, no.
Closing remarks. Okay. Last words, we leave it. You know, do we have any closing remarks? So,
do you have any closing remarks?
I defer to Dr. J.
Well, Frederick Douglass said it best. If there is no struggle, there is no progress. Those who profess to favor freedom yet deprecate agitation are men, and we can add women, who want the crops without plowing up the ground. They want the rain without the thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its many waters. This struggle may be a moral one, it may be a physical one, but it must be a struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did. It never will. Find out what any people will quietly submit to, and you have found out the exact measure of injustice and wrong which will be imposed upon them. And these will continue until they are resisted with either words or blows or both. The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance that they accept. Now, we use that as the key for the sons of Africa to have serious thoughts in their mind and in their consciousness when we met and when we left each other. So that's my word. If there is no struggle, there'll be no progress. All right, thank you much.
My last remarks will be, Amen is satisfied.
That's right.
Yes.
There it is. All right, family. Make sure you please, sign up for the newsletter. Go and make sure you are liking and sharing this video. Make sure that you send it to at least 3 people that get the word out. And just stay tuned. We got a lot of we have a lot of good HAPI stuff happening. All right, family. You too. You're here, so now I don't have to say peace and blessings because you're here, Professor. That's always you. You always say peace and blessings.
But you can say peace and blessings tonight.
All right, fam. There you go. Peace and blessings.
So we have to have our own narrative of what history has been and what history is and what history can be used for. As Dr. Clark, our great scholar, said it best, history can be our clock to tell us where we come from, what time it is, and where we need to go. History can be a compass for us to let us know what we have to do and what we haven't done, so that we have to make sure that we don't build our narrative of socialization, how we get our values, and acculturation, how we fit into society, based upon the lies of European superiority and African inferiority. But we have to understand that we have suffered through a process of dehumanization, but our resilience and our strength has allowed us to rise. And we can say, as Maya Angelou said, and still I rise. And African symbols of rebirth and resurrection, even after death and destruction, show that the Africans built into their culture a consciousness that out of death and destruction can come new life. And this is what is the lesson of HAPI, that there is resilience in the ecological systems of the earth, there's resilience in the human family on earth, and there's resilience in the mysteries of the universe and the divine order of the universe that is not fully understood. But it all represents a chance to bring out of death and destruction new life, and to do as the Africans understood they were doing, build for eternity.
I don't know what we can talk about in this nation without talking about white superiority, honestly.
Who defines the meaning of God also defines the relationship between economy and God.
African Americans spent $1.3 trillion last year, making us the 16th wealthiest nation in the world. Why have we not turned those riches into wealth to develop our community?